Notice is hereby given to the qualified electors of the School District of Kohler, County of Sheboygan, State of Wisconsin, that the budget hearing will be held in the Kohler School District Professional Development Room on Monday, the 28th day of October, 2024 at 6 p.m. Detailed copies of the budget are available for inspection in the district's office at Kohler Public Schools, 333 Upper Road, Kohler, Wisconsin, dated this 14th day of October, 2024.
Thank you very much. Now, Isaac, if you would take us through the proposed budget.
Thank you. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Isaac Patterson, the new business manager, and I have presented for us today the annual meeting and proposed budget. If you would flip in about 6 or 7 pages in, you'll come to my first table on this presentation on our district enrollment.
What does it look like? Can you show us?
I apologize, yes. So the first part of the good news is we've increased 8 students this year. So that's a big positive for the district. Our open enrollment has gone up 14 students this year, and our residents have gone down 6 students this year. In addition to that, I have presented the students that have left our district, open enrollment out, 19 students out, 292 students in, along with their districts that they're coming in and out of. The good news for this, for our budget, is that our FTE calculation, which is what we need for our tax levy calculation, has gone up 1 student. That is based on an average of 3 years of per pupil counts for our district, and that average is slightly increasing for the past few years. This is very good news for the district after we've had a few years in the past of decreasing enrollment. Now seem to be on a positive trend here.
And you have those listed here?
Yes, they are listed on the bottom table, the bottom left, and it shows our per pupil count, our FTE count, which I'll explain in just a moment. And then the middle column on the bottom shows the 3-year rolling average that went up from 462 to 463, and then our total enrollment count in the far right column of that bottom table at 749 students. To the far right of the page, the last table on there shows how the state calculates our students from the enrollment count down to the FTE. And that number 466 that's calculated on there ties back to the first column of the table on the left, the 466, that starts to build our average. That increase leads to more tax levy for the district, which will in turn help us with increasing costs in the future. If you flip to the next page, we have our tax levy. The difference from 22 to 23 was 0. There was no change in the tax levy on those years. This year, from 23 to 24, we are going to have a 4% increase on our general fund levy. This is something that's been planned by the state over the past few years, so definitely a positive for the district. However, knowing that we also want to mitigate the change of taxpayers and the impact that they feel with taxes, if you notice in the next line, debt service, last year we levied an additional $86,000 for additional debt levy so that we could keep that levy the same from 22 to 23 to 23 24. This year we did not increase that levy. So because of that decrease there, in addition to the increase of the general fund, we only amounted to a 2% increase in taxes, just to try and keep that as level as possible for our tax base. The biggest change is, again, in the property tax. We went up 1 student, as I mentioned, but then they also increased the amount per student. We increased from $11,000 to $11,325. That is a change, again, long in the works, definitely been needed for quite a few years, so we're very excited to see that positive trend. We have kept our community service levy stable, so there's no major changes there. Again, all in hopes of mitigating the impact to the taxpayers while also having a slow incline as opposed to a large spike. The total tax change is $119,000, which you can see also in that top table. Down below in the bottom section, we have the equalized value comparison. The change of our mill rate based on equalized value has gone from 6.29 to 6.38, which is a 9-cent increase per thousand. So fairly minimal as far as an increase goes. It could have been a lot worse had we not planned ahead, like in the prior year when we tried to keep that tax base stable. So ended up being a 9-cent change to the mill rate and a 1.36% change to the mill rate. While we're on this same topic, I mentioned there was a $325 increase to the tax rate per student. The open enrollment rate has also gone up by the state to keep things fairly consistent. That's also gone up about another $300 from $8,618 to $8,962. So about a $300 increase again. So
Well, we still don't have the same amount for open enrollment as we have for resident though, correct?
I'm sorry?
We don't get the same amount for open
Not
enrollment?
nearly.
Okay,
Not nearly.
so that hasn't changed?
Yes.
Okay.
So for residents, $11,000. For open enrollment, just under $9,000. So definitely, there's a big difference between open enrollment and resident students, but they both did see an increase, which was positive, and we did see a rather significant increase in our open enrollment students this year. So, if,
Isaac, do we have any students going, participating in the voucher school program?
yes, we do. I do not have that data on here this year, but there are a few that are going out to private schools.
And how much does the district pay to the private school per pupil?
We send out the $8,962 per kid. So
Okay.
that's the open enrollment transfer amount.
Okay,
And the state calculates all of that for us, and
Mhm.
it's all presented as a net number that we get in June for our open enrollment aid.
okay.
So technically, even though that student is a resident, we collect the
What's that, Tara?
11,000. So
Right,
when
right.
we have a resident student,
And then we lose.
we're technically collecting the 11,325, but then we pay out the 8,925, correct?
Yeah.
Something like that.
So, and then all of those open enrollment out students, which this year was 19, as opposed to 23 last year, that money will be netted out against our aid that we receive in June. So that the state just takes care of that for us and sends it out to the right schools and the right private schools. If you flip forward one more page, we have our table of equalized value. For the equalized value this year, again, pretty much every taxing entity has gone up. The difference, the exception you may note, is the Village of Kohler. This year, the Village of Kohler had a reassessment of property, so that does tend to decrease the equalized value a little bit. We had the same effect last year when the City of Sheboygan had a reassessment, where they also decreased the value. So if you look back in the bottom table, on City of Sheboygan, it shows 32% of the tax levy. In the prior year, 22-23, they had 38% of the tax levy, so that reassessment decreased their value. Same thing happened here for Village of Kohler. The Village of Kohler went from 64.9% down to 64%. So that is very standard when a community has a reassessment. It's kind of putting things relatively back to what they were before, because Sheboygan went down, now Kohler went down, kind of leveling things back to what we kind of expected for the most part, based on the largest majority of the tax base. Also on this table, we show the community's equalized values, which leads to the percentage of the levy that they are allocated. And then finally, the third column on the top shows the full levy for each of the taxing entities. We are amounting to a $6,255,411 tax levy this year. As opposed to, you can see all the exact same numbers for last year down below, the $6,135,000. So change is relatively minimal. We tried to keep that as steady as possible. If you flip one more page,
Isaac, before we flip,
certainly.
am I reading this correctly? Even though our levy went up 2%, our Village of Kohler levy only went up $25,000, right? That's how I'm reading that?
Correct.
Okay.
So the total increase is relatively small when you divide it out per taxing entity and even then per taxpayer. That's why also I'd like to draw attention back to the prior page. the mill rate increase of only 9 cents per thousand. So it's not a significant change. Even though the total dollar amount may seem large, it's not a significant change per taxpayer. Thank you. Flipping on again to the next page, we have a history of our mill rate trend and how it has been slowly decreasing. So at some point here, we had up to 11% in 2010, 2011. We had 11 cents for our mill rate, and now we've gone down to 6.38. So we've definitely had a decrease as far as that rate goes. So good news for the tax base. It is a minor increase this year, but compared to our history, it's not large. And then if we flip the next page, I have all of our funds presented with a multiple year history along with 2 years of budget. We will go over some of the unaudited data later in the annual meeting portion, but for now, as far as the budget goes, we have the final column on the right presented per fund and what our intent is as far as the district goes. If you look in the middle column for the 23-24 budget for the general fund, last year we anticipated a loss of $952,000. That was entirely planned based on our referendum. We intended to spend some of our fund balance as well. We definitely appreciate the huge investment from our community and the show of support for the referendum. But we also want the community to know that we've been saving and that we were intending to invest in there also. So we're not just putting it all on the tax base. So that was our intended projection. As everyone knows, with COVID and increased costs for supply chain issues, we ran a little bit higher in the actual cost, but we'll go into that later. This year, however, we are running with a pretty near balanced budget. We are at a net projected change of $806 of increase. So this year we have absorbed the cost of the increase of all of our utilities and the new teacher positions and everything that we had planned to do with the referendum. We absorbed all of the operating costs as planned so that we do not have any significant decrease in ability to teach, inability to fund whatever supplies we need, whatever maintenance. We're going to be on a steady path. So very good news for the district. The significant thing you'll notice is down in the bottom, the one change on here that I have presented in my statement is the other financing sources. Typically, that's something that, forgive me, working on a cough. Typically, that's something you'll see in the financial statements when presented by the auditors. There is no real column to drop that into, so this is new. This will be new for our presentation going forward, and it will be shown on the general fund from year to year. But we have additions to fund balance, which we would consider savings. So that would be our long-term investment in future capital. Again, we spent that down last year, so this year we're looking to save a little bit more and start building up that long-term fund balance again. We do have uses of fund balance on there as well. We have additional, excuse me. We have additional restricted funds that last year from our donors we needed to finish spending, and just based on the time that it takes to spend those funds, this year we're planning to spend those down to pretty near zero. So that is a change that amounts to about $25,000. On the following page, we have our Fund 27. Fund 27 is presented separately here. When we see our audit report in December, that will be combined with Fund 10. And any other annual state reports we see, Fund 27 will always be combined with Fund 10. However, for our presentation and internal purposes, we can look at what our projected spending is here. Considering that all school districts only get about 30% on special education cost reimbursements, it's the district's job to be as frugal as possible while also meeting all the needs that we can. So you'll notice in the prior year, 23-24, the very first row, operating transfers in, shows that we anticipated a loss, which is a transfer in from Fund 10, of $558,000. This year, attempting to be as frugal as possible, but also meeting those needs, we are going down to a $479,000 transfer from Fund 10. So We feel that's a significant step in the right direction as far as financing goes, while at the same time, we feel that we're able to offer even more services than we have in the past. Again, Fund 27 doesn't have its own fund balance, so it will always net out to zero because of that transfer from Fund 10. Following page on Fund 39, we show our projection of Fund 39 referendum debt. You'll notice that the numbers for the revenue coming in and the expenditures going out do not match. That is always intended. We base our levy each year based on the calendar year's upcoming payments, so that the money is coming in time to make those debt payments. But then our expenditures are always going to be based on the fiscal year, so that as we see those expenses coming in, we already have the funds sitting ready to go. This one is relatively simple. You'll notice that that number for the local sources is our tax levy, exactly tied out to the dollar. And then our expenses, again, are a little bit higher just based on interest rates decreasing, mean that our total payment decreases each year as well. If you flip one more page, you have our long-term debt schedule. We show the entire debt schedule. In the top, you have gray, which has already been paid out, and then down below is white for what is upcoming payments. The first two rows in white are this year's payments. And then if you notice the 2025 calendar year amounts, so row 2 and 3 of the white, that'll be what our tax levy is based on. If we flip one more page, Fund 46, Fund 49. Yes.
Isaac, Corey, quick question.
Certainly, Corey.
The declining of the interest rates, what are those projections based on?
Those are based on the statement that we received from Ellers when they set up our entire debt statement. They gave us a gigantic book that has our amortization schedule. It has all of our notes and all the information that we need. Those are the exact rates stated there.
Okay.
So,
Thank you. I hope they're right.
I'm sorry?
I said I hope they're right.
Well, yeah.
The direction.
Definitely, the interest rates, they tend to have a little bit higher rates in the beginning. As you notice, those 5% rates going down to 3%. And then we have our couple of really good years in the 1%, and then we kind of level off at 2%.
Do we have a call?
So that's locked. That's not a projection. That's locked into the original covenants.
Correct. And yes,
Got
Paul,
it. Okay,
on,
got it. Thank you.
on the top, under the blue, 3 lines down, I have a callable date of 3/1/2028.
Oh, I see.
So yes, that's definitely intent that the district wants to look into and wants to start to pursue. We will discuss that more in the future.
So depending on the rates.
Yeah, exactly. So definitely something that we intend to pursue and something that I've already started looking into. But we will have further discussions on it later.
Thank you.
Certainly, Corey. Then we're on to fund. I apologize.
Doing great.
Yeah, take it.
Yeah.
I know
Been
you're
recovering
still-
from a cough for a few weeks,
Sorry,
so. Then we're on to Fund 46 and Fund 49. This definitely looks different this year. Fund 49 has been our referendum fund. Over the past few years, we have a lot of history to show in that, which all got closed in 23-24. Again, we'll delve into that later. But at this point, looking at 24-25, at this point, all we have is Fund 46, which amounts to about $1,000 plus $7 in interest. So relatively small activity.
Does that two mean $2?
$2.
That was our interest.
That's our projected interest. So very small, very near non-existent.
Got it.
Moving on to Fund 50. We will discuss this further again, but this is similar to Fund 27. The first line is going to be operating transfers in. So every year we expect to fund some level of our operating costs for Fund 50. Fund 50 is allowed to make a profit, but it cannot go into any general expenses for the school district. It would just sit in Fund 50 to be able to pay for maybe a big cost that's building up, a new oven, a new freezer, something like that. However, our trend is that we're always a smidge under as far as what we bring in versus what our expenses are, so we typically have a transfer in line. You'll notice that we've increased from $2,500 to $11,000 to last year a loss of $40,000, so the general fund had to absorb. We will dig into that more once we go into the 23-24 in the annual meeting, but for now, those are our notes. This year's budget of 24-25 has a projected loss of $186. This is all due to the fact that Taher has increased our lunch prices, which is expected, but also not always fun, but that covers the costs that we need to project to save the loss that we had last year. One more page, Fund 80. Or I should say one more fund. We have two more pages. Fund 80. We are presenting Fund 80 in two different ways. The last page is showing the exact same categories that we've already discussed, with local sources, other sources, and then down for expenditures, it's going to show salaries, benefits, purchase services. However, considering Fund 80's unique nature, we've also presented it in a way that we believe makes more sense to our community, kind of breaking down between Kohler Care, recreation, operation, and explaining our revenues based on those expenses. The intent is roughly that our property taxes will cover some degree of our operations and our recreation. We know that that's not the full extent of that. We also don't want to raise the tax rate on our taxpayers, but we do have other sources to help to fund that. You'll notice the Kohler Care fees, their projection covers Kohler Care line, but also Kohler Care's share of operations and Kohler Care's share of facilities projects. And then finally, other revenue is unique sources that DPI chooses to put there, including interest, including refunds of expenditures and odd things like that. So that's pretty much both pages there, but Fund 80 again is very similar to the other funds in that whatever money is in Fund 80 stays in Fund 80. It does not go to support any activities in Fund 10. So no increase in costs for Kohler Care or anything of that sort will be paying for school activities. That will stay there to pay for future Kohler Care needs or whatever needs come up as far as community service goes. So there's no concern of intermingling funds. Whatever's invested in Fund 80 and community service will stay there. That is everything for our budget. Does anyone have any questions?
I just have a quick question about the Fund 80 salaries. So who would that include?
So that would include all of our Kohler Care employees. That would also include some members of staff that are involved in community the community service oversight.
Ryan's salary.
Thank you.
Okay.
Ryan Springer's in there.
He's the Kohler Care and the community events.
So
Does that include, I guess my question is, how intertwined is this with the village? Are we paying, where does like the rec director's salary come from?
Not
That's
here.
not this.
Not here.
Okay.
No. There are a few different types of agreements that we have. For example, the library is a straight rent agreement. That one's relatively simple. They pay us a certain amount every year, and it increases based on the consumer price index each year.
Okay.
Some of the other ones, like as far as the village gym and the pool, are a little bit more complex. We allocate a share of the utilities. We pay 100% of the utilities, and then we allocate a share back. So we're trying to recuperate costs that way.
Okay.
As far
Makes
as
sense.
it kind of spans three different areas. Our rent is paying for the utilities. However, we pay for, because those spaces are shared between community and school, we share those costs within Fund 10 and Fund 80. So Fund 10 bears the brunt of those costs because we use them for classes, but then Fund 80 community service in the evenings when the pool's being used bears its own share.
Got it. Okay.
So it's that one gets rather complex, but shared three different ways.
And
Thank
Isaac,
you.
one quick question.
Yes.
Under purchased services, it's been traditionally around $100,000, but in 22-23 it spiked to 251. Does anybody remember what special thing we did that year?
Was that,
Legal. That would include legal fees, that would include,
Not from Fund 80.
Yes.
yeah.
no, are we talking about Fund 80?
Yes, Fund 80.
Oh, Fund 80.
That
So-
was referendum.
Referendum stuff, and
That
if
was
it's, yeah, Fund
Kohler
80.
Care, Cubbies, bathroom.
Okay, thank you.
I didn't realize it was in Fund 80, but yeah.
Any other questions?
Thank you.
Good job.
Thank you.
Thank you. Really nice job, Isaac. I've always praised Matt as having been a very good storyteller, and you did a very good job taking us through this as well. Thank you.
I appreciate it, Corey. Thank you.
If there are no other questions, then we will adjourn this meeting. Any objections to adjourning?
No?
Okay, then this meeting is adjourned, and we have about 4 minutes until we will call the annual meeting to order.
Great, thank you.
Sounds good.
We are adjourned.
No, Isaac did a great job on organizing this. So he had to
We're
have
still
some
on
fun
air.
stuff.
We're still on
Thank
air,
you.
just so you guys know.
He did a great job.
I appreciate you all. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, Isaac.
Thank you.
Oh, honors.
So the National Honor Society is being, the new kids are being inducted right now?
That's
Aw.
correct. Natasha's just on her way out. Good luck.
Have fun.
Well, thank you, Natasha.
Take a picture for me, please.
Next time, let's schedule it differently.
The next meeting, we'll schedule it, yeah. We have a new skirt for our table.
I see.
And we have a new on-air sign over there, so you know when we are on air.
That draping looks nice from here on the camera. It looks very, very nice.
Yeah, it does look nice.
Now I can start wearing a dress to board meetings.
Oh,
And
yeah.
I never wanted to wear a dress
Mhm.
because, you know, now
Right,
I can wear
you're- yeah.
Nobody can
Nobody
see.
would know.
Except when we have to stand up.
It can be Zoom.
Does anyone tell Corey that we're on the air, just to make sure that he knows?
Oh,
Yeah.
so we're just gonna remain on the air through
The whole time.
the
Mhm.
meetings, okay.
Got it? Okay.
Yeah.
I'll avoid picking my nose.
Hmm. That's
Gonna be in a different meeting?
next, yeah.
And this next one traditionally goes very quick.
Yes.
Yeah,
Right, so
very,
this
very
next
quickly.
one,
The longest one is when I do my state of the district. That's the longest report.
right,
And I will very briefly mention some things for 23, 24. But
We only have
just a
to
few
go 5
highlights.
minutes, so.
Well, we scheduled it for 5 minutes so that whenever we were finished, we could, start the next meeting then. So we wouldn't have this lag.
But no, I don't anticipate much time for.
that's no, so this one,
This next one goes fast.
yes.
So I was in Shanghai for the first time in 5 years since before COVID, and early in this trip, and I would say 60% of the personal cars were probably 60% were electric. The air was so much better all 3 days. Like the air quality would be in the 280 to 360 range the years I had been there
Wow.
before, and it was in the 110s, 120s this time. And Wisconsin's in the 20, 25s,
Yeah.
right? But,
Yeah.
so it's still 5 times as worse as Wisconsin,
That's
but
nuts.
just a tremendous change.
That's a
Even the
quick-
scooters, the little mopeds were almost all electric.
Wow,
So
that's a
they've
quick change.
undergone a big change.
Wow,
Wow.
that's huge.
That's significant.
Cause I don't think we were letting our kids run when our air quality was like 110, right? Wasn't it
Yeah,
warnings
sports
and
were
Yeah.
canceled.
sports were
Mhm.
canceled, they weren't allowed to be outside?
Mhm.
Wow, that's crazy.
That's a really quick change. I wonder. The
Probably
catalyst
you'll need
there
the
was,
same notice, I believe.
or the second notice. Let me pull that back. The annual district meeting notice,
Yes.
correct?
Correct.
And is Adrian in the room?
Yes, she is.
Okay, hi.
Hi.
I have to refer to her, and I wanted to make sure she was there.
Same day. Well, this says that it's at 6 o'clock. It's at 6:30.
This is the annual, so budget hearing's at 6, annual at 6:30. And then board meeting at 6:30.
Oh, further. Okay, got it. Yeah. Just have to read the whole thing.
All right, my clock shows 6:30, so for the annual meeting, I will call the annual meeting to order. I appoint Adrian to be the ballot clerk. And now we must go to item 3, elect chairperson for this meeting.
I nominate nominate Corey to chair the meeting.
Second?
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Kelly is there, so we do not need to elect someone to act as the clerk. So, Kelly, I'd ask you to read the printed notice, please.
Sure. Notice for annual district meeting. Notice is hereby given to the qualified electors of the School District of Kohler, County of Sheboygan, State of Wisconsin, that an annual meeting of said district for the transaction of business will be held in the Kohler School Professional Development Room on Monday, the 28th of October, 2024 at 6:30 p.m. The budget hearing of said district for review of the budget will be held in the same place on the same day at 6 o'clock p.m. Dated this 14th day of October, 2024, and 22nd day of October, 2024.
Very good. Thank you. Now the time for the treasurer's report.
All right. If you would open the book to about halfway in to Fund 10, the first page with 5 columns of data presented. Briefly, we show 4 columns. The fourth one, or 5 columns, sorry. The fourth one being 23-24 unaudited. You may note the district did have their audit in July and August. This data will remain unaudited until December 15th, which is the due date for audit reports to be issued for the state, and it will remain to say unaudited till that point. There are no anticipated changes. This data is very solid, but it is not technically audited until that audit report is issued. Going into the data very shortly, very briefly here, Fund 10 definitely did experience a loss that was anticipated by the district to share a brunt of the costs that we have asked our taxpayers to assist us with in the referendum. Due to costs, the loss was a little bit greater than originally budgeted, but that was fairly standard for the industry and fairly standard with where all other school districts and, quite frankly, most of the private sector was landing. So we feel that we landed pretty good considering where costs were trending. Fund 27, as I mentioned in the budget meeting, is all absorbed in Fund 10, all rolled in there. So eventually all those costs do end up showing on the audit report in Fund 10. On to Fund 39, the budget is very, very standard to what actually happened. There's not really much changes other than you'll notice in local sources there was more interest earned. Very small amount. We can skip past the Fund 39 debt table on to Fund 46. The referendum ended. We finished our construction. We opened up everything. All those costs are completed in 23-24. So you'll notice large expenses dwindling down to a fund balance of only that $1,000 that's just left for Fund 46. But we show all of our expenses in there. And again, it shows unaudited, but our auditors have already come in, have already evaluated those expenses, and feel confident that we are done. On to next page, Fund 50. This was the fund that definitely took the largest hit. That was, I'll say, a little bit more of a unanticipated amount. Our food vendor, Taher, works very hard to try and anticipate increased costs for the year, but last year saw a lot of increased costs that by the time we set our lunch rates, it was just too late to anticipate and make a change for those costs. We did take a $40,000 loss in Fund 50. Very, very significant.
What does our agreement look like with Taher that we're absorbing that cost rather than them?
So Taher pays 100% of the expenses, and then we pay them for 100% of those expenses plus our administrative fee and their profit in that administrative fee. We only pay expenses. We are 100% responsible for receiving all the revenue, and we make changes to our lunch rates based on their projections.
So we're in an agreement with them that whatever they report their expenses to be, we're responsible for those expenses.
Correct.
It's just a cost plus contract with no incentive for them to reduce costs.
Correct. And this is for another day, but it's in our board policy that we contract with Taher, and I would suggest that we review that. They're specifically called out in our board policy.
Yes, they are. That is something that, since I've started, I've also noticed that the increased cost is something that a lot of our families aren't thrilled by, which I totally understand. And I've definitely noticed that as well. That's something I would like to visit as well. There's more to discuss on that topic, and more analysis to be provided in a formal method, but we've definitely seen increased costs, increased expenses, and we had a $40,000 loss. That was not fun.
We've had a lot of conversation around it, that our next step is to take the board into.
We
Yes.
talked about it heavily at finance.
So, coming further
call.
down the road, but thank you for pointing that out. Definitely something we want to discuss more. Fund 80. The unaudited data is pretty standard. We have not had a lot of significant increases to our Kohler care costs. Our tax levy's been the same for years, and we didn't have a lot of increased costs for Kohler care. The first cost increase happened over the summer, so we saw a little bit of the trend of that in the 23-24 data, but you'll also notice 2025 data shows the largest percent of that increase. That's just due to the increased costs. We got hit with those costs in 23-24, and they're significant. Payroll goes up, supplies goes up, food goes up, and it was time that we finally needed to increase those costs in Kohler care to be able to match and still provide the high level of service that we do. Again, Fund 80 is presented on two separate pages. The first one showing as far as the activity, Kohler care, community, but then the following page kind of combining everything in Fund 80 together and showing the expenses all lumped together as a Fund 80 in DPI's chart of accounts. Overall, very good year for the district. We anticipated the loss in Fund 10. We anticipated Fund 80 or Fund 10 to have about that loss. It was about 80,000 greater than we anticipated, but again, cost change, fun stuff. And then in Fund 50, that was the other significant change. Again, we'll discuss that more, but those are the two primary changes that we had. That is it for the treasurer's report.
Then the state of the district, our vision and mission. I believe that the success of the school district is a result of our partnership with the community and the school working together. Our students see both in school and in the community. Our students see an abundance of examples of inspiration. Want to hand me that?
Certainly.
They see inspiration and inquiry. Our mission is to ensure that we prepare students to become creators and innovators and leaders to improve the world. Our strategic plan involves some growth data and some achievement data. Last year we had our strategic plan was we wanted 75% of our students to hit 50% above the 50 percentile, which we hit that. So this year we did a little bit of a stretch, and our goal was 75% of the students to score in the 60th percentile on map reading and reading and math. We fell a little bit shy of that, but we came really close. The thing is I wanted to point out, though, is at the elementary school in reading, the growth was in the 56th percentile. The elementary school math growth was in the 68th percentile. Middle school was in the 50th, and middle school math growth was in the 63rd percentile. So even though we didn't hit quite the 75% of our kids in the 60th percentile, our growth was better than that 50th percentile, so better than average growth, which I was really pleased with. We struggled with our growth in the past. So our priority goal, our elementary, we had 72% made it, and we were shooting for that 75 and fell a little short. With elementary math, 74% of our kids scored in that 60th percentile or higher. Middle school was 62% and in reading and 69% in math. So a little bit shy of that 75% of the students in that 60th percentile, but that's a pretty big stretch goal. Two of the highlights I wanted to point out was our third grade ELA. We had 53% of the kids scored in that advanced category, and that's above the 80th percentile. So we have over half of our third graders functioning in the top 20% of kids in the nation, which is pretty spectacular. And again, in fourth grade, that was 54% scored in the advanced. So even though we fell a little shy, I think that advanced category tells a story for us. We have kids really functioning at that top 20%. This is from math scores. They're nationally normed. Millions of kids take the MAP score. So when you can function in that 80th percentile. That's better than 80% of the kids in the nation, not just in Wisconsin. So really, really pleased with those scores, even though we fell a little shy of our 75% hitting the 60th percentile. Our priority,
Lisa,
yeah,
I just want to make sure I was hearing correctly. That was both ELA and math?
Yes.
Were in the top 20% in the nation?
yes.
Wow.
No.
not just
Well,
one.
no, it was third grade ELA, and then fourth grade math. Those were the two really spectacular that kind of stood out. We have a lot of kids functioning in that top percent, but I just thought over half of the kids in that 80th percent is pretty unusual.
Thank you.
Yep. The priority 2 was implementing that culture and climate survey, which we did in January, and we will establish that every January. So our first culture and climate survey gave us a very good baseline for that. Every January we'll continue that same and keep improving to give us that data to help us identify areas to focus. Priority 3 was to utilize our spaces, which we've done a great job on. The new spaces have met our expectations. They provided modernized, flexible spaces. Student can access the technology to enhance that learning experience with collaboration and inquiry, which is what the goal of that was. Looking to the future, we're making adjustments to our instructional practices as well as the classroom environments. We want, again, to have those opportunities for students to collaborate. Our elementary STEAM lab offers our elementary students to engage in that space and live our mission. We've added the Nourish program at the elementary level, which brought an element of culinary arts and food science into the STEAM area. So we're really happy to keep that one moving forward. Physical security, we expect everyone to follow our golden rules of safety. Our community resource officer does a great job of keeping a diligent eye out for our door security. We do regularly safety lessons. We run safety drills to ensure students know what to do in case of an emergency. Our staff has been all trained with the full training. We just completed that in the last 2 months. Most people don't know, but we do have shatterproof coating on all of our large exterior windows, which is great. And we also have completed a digital mapping of the building with the critical response group. So police, fire, and rescue all have digital maps of our building. Adam Turner has done a great job with our cybersecurity and working in that area to up our protection and updated our computer systems. We are continuing to use GoGuardian to help our administrative staff keep a close eye on students and their safety online. School board tactical plans, the HR committee again is implementing a culture and climate survey last January. We will continue that. They've also been involved in hiring the new administrative staff this past spring. Policy committee will continue updates from Neola. We usually do 2 typical policy updates each year as recommended. Curriculum committee approved middle school math, Reveal Math this year, and we also have moved to a new reading intervention program with Alexia Core that's going to help us with the science of reading in Act 20 for grades K through 8. And that is our state of the district.
All right.
Good news.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That covers item 6, I believe. So now we move on to item 7. I just want to make sure I'm tracking.
Correct.
Okay, then I would call to consider a motion to levy a school tax as recommended. Sorry, I didn't mean to transition so quickly.
You're good.
Thank you both for that report, both Isaac and Lisa. A great summary of last year. So now I call to consider a motion to levy a school tax as recommended in the school board's budget for the operation of schools, pupil transportation, building and maintenance, debt, and capital outlay for the 24-25 school year in the amount of $6,255,411.
So moved.
Second.
Under anything additional under discussion?
Yeah, I saw a process here. I'm looking at board docs, and after we have item 7B, reading of a notice. Were we supposed to do that before we moved on to item 8?
I'm looking at script, Word document, so sorry, let me.
No.
Oh, that's the notice that I read before. Should I? Isn't it?
It's probably not, I know it's. It's
Oh,
calendar that-
maybe it just got pushed down there? Or was that the reading of was that the state of the district?
No.
No, that should have been up here.
It should, it was.
That's the
Kelly
Kelly's reading, okay.
Disregard. It's listed here, but we've already done it.
Okay, all right, thank you then. All in favor of the motion for 6.255,411 411, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Now we'll move on to the consent agenda. I have to read all three of them fully. Item A is Resolution B, reimbursement of school board expenses, which authorize the payment of actual and necessary expenses of a school board member when traveling and performance of duties, including the IRS reimbursement rate for the use of their own vehicles. Item B is Resolution C, legal proceedings, authorizing the board to direct and provide the prosecution or defense in which the school district is interested. This is a routine authorization and saves calling a special meeting each time legal action might be needed. And item C is Resolution D, transportation, which authorizes transportation of students who reside more than 2 miles from the school or in a hazardous transportation zone. I would accept the motion to approve the consent agenda.
So moved.
Second.
And motion and a second. Anything under discussion?
I would just note that, item 9A, the reimbursement for school board expenses, that's usually like $0 or maybe very minimal amount for someone who claims it. And most of us don't get reimbursement.
Okay. Any other discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Item 9, new business. To set the annual meeting date for 25-26. The annual meetings, just for the audience, may not be held before May 15th or after October 31st due to tax and state aid information arriving in mid-October. It's recommended to have the annual meeting before October 31st. So I would seek a motion for next year's annual meeting to be October 27th, 2025.
So moved.
Second.
I would like to, do we set the time? Okay, so can we think about a 5:30 start time?
Yeah, I think that's a great ad, Kelly. Any reason why we shouldn't do it at 5:30, team?
Why did we start?
I think it's just always been 6 o'clock to show that it's a different meeting from our other meetings. It's just different. I think it's because it's just a different meeting. That's what the board decided to set. So you can set it anytime you want.
Okay, I would be in favor of a 5:30 start time, especially if there's gonna be a conflict like there is tonight. I'm very disappointed.
There's always something.
Okay, thanks.
So then I think
So
on that one, oh, sorry, Corey, on that one then, if we've set the date, I think the ask would be, or the direction would be that as we're calendared out next year, we are cognizant of this date being essentially immovable. And I think I would ask that we don't schedule conflicts with it that are inside our control. Is that fair? Yeah.
Yes. Right. Okay.
Excellent discussion. Yes, we would ask that, immovable is the word, this is a legal set, so we'd ask the activities to be scheduled around. Anything else under discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And motion carries. I hereby adjourn this meeting and we will transition into our regular school board meeting if there are no objections.
Okay.
Okay, let's stretch into the next one. I will call today's regular board meeting to order. Kelly, would you please take the roll?
Yes. Tara.
Here.
Paul.
Here.
Corey.
Here, but here.
And I am here, and Heather is excused.
Very good. Adrian, when was the statement of public notice, please?
Friday, October 25th.
And I would entertain a motion to approve tonight's agenda.
So moved.
Second.
And all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Let's honor our nation by reciting the Pledge of Allegiance. I
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Alright, next item up for bid. I would entertain a motion to act on what we just did in the previous meeting to set the tax levy at $6,255,401.
Yeah.
Corey, we do have one person in the audience, so we just probably wanna ask if anybody wants to address the board.
so I would entertain that motion, 6.2,055,411 for the 24-25 school year.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Second. Anything else under discussion? All in favor say aye.
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 Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. I would entertain a motion to adopt the proposed budget for the 24-25 school year.
So moved.
Second.
Anything under discussion?
I would just like to say that, Isaac is in his third month, maybe, and has done a ton of work on this budget. It's, we're so used to Matt just knocking it out, and he could do it in his sleep, and this is, a totally different place or type of work for Isaac, although he's used to school. So I just wanted, just give him congratulations on a balanced budget. He's had to do tons of research. He's interviewed, I think, every single person in the school, just figuring out where things go and which buckets things belong in. And I know it's been a ton of work, and we appreciate it. And I think it's going to only be easier for him. So great job tonight, and thank
Yeah.
you.
Thank you, Isaac.
Thank you, I appreciate it.
The budget, we have a motion and a second. If there's nothing else under discussion, all in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries. I would entertain a motion to approve the facility committee recommendations.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Can I give you
Second.
an exact motion?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so I'd like to make
I
a
would
motion.
entertain an amendment to the motion before the board.
Sorry, I should have told you ahead of time. I'd like to make a motion to, approve the facilities update, one trophy case on the east wall, and, should not be any expense to the school, if so, up to, not to exceed $3,000.
And do we have a second for that motion?
Sorry, that was clunky.
Yeah, second.
Okay, anything else under discussion for this motion? All right, all in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries. And the final item for tonight, we've had a great experience with Isaac. I would entertain a motion to approve a contract for Isaac as our business manager.
So moved.
I will enthusiastically second that motion.
And- Okay, and anything under discussion, other than another thank you for the great onboarding and how you dived into tracing all the dollars through our organization.
Thank you very
All right,
much.
all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Excellent. And if there is nothing further, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved. Second.
All right, anything under discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thanks, everybody. Sorry to be